Hey guys, hope everyone's format's going well. So this time back with the draft video, and I wanted to put a specific emphasis on the role of sideboarding in one draft. I think that in this format in particular, it's played a really big role in mitigating like the play draw differential that a lot of people have been talking about, and also that there's a lot of ways that cards match up that maybe to me is more impactful even than your average format. And so I wanted to, or I had rather picked out a draft where I made a lot of decisions in sideboarding. And yeah, so let's jump into it. This time I'm not going to go through the draft as in depth as I otherwise would. Just go through it so we can see some of the picks and with some small discussion along the way. But then we're going to look at the games and some sideboarding decisions. So here, starting with the Spinoderm and just red rare. Here, going easily into Gruul, as maybe many of us are familiar with this format. This Reservoir I don't usually play. I wasn't passing that much for it and wanted to give it a shot. Here, just normal stuff. One comment I will make that because of the role of sideboarding in this format, this is an example of a pick that I've been making where I think it's better to take good or impactful sideboard cards than it is to take middling like cards that you're not happy to have in your main deck, unless you get later on into the draft and you know you need to fill a certain spot on your curve or a certain role in your deck. So like here, for example, even though Slowbat is like fine, it's a 3-mana 3/3 functionally in most decks, I'm going to take the Canopy because I'd much rather have access to a Canopy in a matchup where I want it than to end up with this kind of mediocre 3-mana 3/3 at the end of my draft. So I'm going to be taking a few picks like this. So within kind of the topic of sideboarding, I think this is some adjustment that you can make maybe in some of your best of 3 drafts that can maybe help increase your win percentages a little bit. Here, this was just a for science pick. I didn't really know where I'm headed. I've never played this card, but I have the Reservoir, and if I was going to move into red-black, maybe. But anyways, we end up not there, just spoiler. So here, just some more random picks. Again, an example, not that there was too much over it, but Basilisk is a particular card that can matter in some matchups out of the board. And so I think sometimes people just think of these picks as like throwaway because you're almost never going to main deck this card. And, something like Charge of the Mites is situationally a reasonable playable, right? So they might take that as a hedge to white. But again, I would contend that it's better to take cards that are impactful out of the sideboard if you have a reasonable idea where you're at. Here I have the Spinoderm and the Ravager, so I do have some strong incentives to be in green still. Okay, same thing with these 2-mana 1/3s. Sometimes you'll play like a Glider even if you're not in like a Corruption deck necessarily, or like a Long Legs out of the sideboard if you're playing like blue-black Proliferate and they have 1/1 flyers and stuff. It can be a complete game changer just to have access to something like this. So rather than think that, hey, Annihilating Glare is a reasonable card, what if I open a Black Bomb? Firstly, Annihilating Glare is decent, but it's not that good. And secondly, again, for me, I've been trying to make it so that I have better sideboarding options in my matchups. Here, just random stuff. Yep, more here. Nothing too crazy, I don't think. Again, I'm just going through these really quickly just so you guys can get a feel for what the draft picks are. And if I see something relevant, I'll discuss. So here, the Molten Rebukes, I think, are undervalued as sideboard cards because people think that they're sideboard cards specifically against the equipment decks. And yeah, cool, they're decent against the equipment, or they're actively maybe good even against the equipment decks. But you can also side out like your 5-drops on the draw and put in a Molten Rebuke, because the difference being that it impacts the board the exact turn it comes down. So you're less likely to get blown out by stuff like Hazardous Blast, like won't just end the game on the spot, or you don't have to rely on playing your own 5-drop and hoping to block and maybe they don't have a trick, right? You can just play directly to the removal if they tap out for a 5-drop. And on the draw, you're already up resources. So if you can impact the board immediately that turn, it's usually a lot better than playing to a creature to the board and hoping that it's good enough. So yeah, you'll see that I do this on the draw in some matchups. I'll side out like a 5-drop and put in a Molten Rebuke because it plays the role that I want a lot better. And in this format, a lot of people are playing like kind of tempo oriented decks where they want to play to the board and they use their interaction as combat tricks. And it turns out that that means that they're susceptible to running out of steam. So if you trade 1-for-1 enough times and you have a removal spell at the top of your curve and then you follow it up with a creature, it could be the case that they're just stuck. So again, I think this is something that is undervalued as a sideboard card in the format, especially because this type of card typically has not been that good in other formats. So yeah, just something to keep an eye out on. And a quick comment on this one too, the Nahiri Sacrifice also, randomly a good sideboard card against the enchantment removal, right? So if you see 3 pacifisms or a bunch of whatever the blue tap down claustrophobia card is, right, then this is relevant. Also, sometimes this is good enough to put in against like the really kind of small go wide like white based decks or white black based decks, because even though, yes, it's card disadvantage, what you care about is being able to kill multiple bodies at a time. Again, I'm not saying that you should just blindly put this in your deck, but there are times when this plays out way better than it looks. I had a deck, for example, where I was lacking interaction, and I happened to have like 2 of the 4-mana 4/2 equips, I think Full Shock Splitters or something, and I happened to just throw this in there, and when you can sack it and deal 4 damage split amongst your opponent's board, it can be a really huge game changer. So just keep an eye out that this is not an actual nothing, even though, yeah, you still don't want to be main decking it a lot. Cool. Kind of a late Furnace Strider, happy to pick it up. Speaking of the play and draw, by the way, I think this card is become a little bit overrated. On the play, it feels great that you can just swing out for 4 and have like this nice relevant large body. But on the draw, you're usually not in the role where the haste is that important anyways. And it is a 5-mana 4/5, so it's not like a premium common in my opinion in red. It contributes to red being a very deep color because it's something that you're not upset to play, but I wouldn't think of it as like a strong pull into red, and I don't think that it's so good that you should never side it out. Here again, just some other picks, same thing here. Happy to pick this guy up late because there are matchups where it'll be relevant. I'm a Luxac, get more rares, you know, easy draft, Hexgold Slash, so forth. More dudes. Another Rebuke. I don't think over anything, but just taking the red card pretty much. Free from Flesh. Here, Slinger also out of the board. I'm actually not too upset to main deck these in a lot of my red decks, or at least one copy. But, you know, when you run into the artifact decks, super nice to have access to a on-curve 2-drop that incidentally works as a hate piece. And they pair up very nicely with the Chimney Rabbles because you can sack off like the 1/1s and stuff, and yeah. All right, so that's a quick look at the draft. Here's what the final deck ends up looking like, along with the things that I've left in the board. Again, not the greatest on playables. The mana's a little weird because I don't have a lot of green cards, but I have a plethora of double green stuff, 2 of which are on 4 mana, and I'd very much like to cast on curve. So my mana base is a little weird here. I think I'm on like 9/8, even though my deck is very largely just by card count red. It's close to an even split to accommodate the double greens, and I'm hoping that, you know, access to some of the filtering can help me not get stuck or stalled out too much. Playing one Cackler here that I'd picked up, as I have, as you can see, like a lot of actually energy based stuff, or not energy, whatever these mechanics called, oil based stuff. And then these Centurions I would not recommend putting in your main deck very often, but I am trying out this Reservoir, seeing as it works with basically at least something, if not multiple things, at every spot on my curve. So I'm playing the Reservoir, so I figured these are defensible, and I needed something to do on 3 mana anyways. And again, like I'd mentioned, I'm not looking to main deck these things. So this is the deck. So what we're going to do is take a look at the game ones, and then I'll show you the deck again, and if you want to pause or something and have a chance to think about how you would board given the matchup, and then I'll talk about sort of what I thought, and then take a look at the post-board game, and see if our sideboard strategy was effective or had anything. And fair warning for everyone out there, this is not my best. I make some very questionable plays in this draft, and I am frequently not punished for being bad at this game in this draft. But I thought this was a really good sideboarding example, and so I didn't want to forego it just because I played like trash. So don't judge me just on this draft. I swear I'm not always this bad. So here, just keep reasonable hand. Play this out. I know it's susceptible to removal, but I want to use my mana. And if they remove it, you know, oh well, is my thought. I'd rather be using my mana efficiently here. 2-drop, they play a 2-drop, more 2-drops. And play the... So I had a... Oh, what happened here? I forgot. Hold on, I'm going too quick. Okay, yeah, so they Kaido and make a 2-2. It was at this point playing the actual game that I realized I messed up. My thought process of playing the Forest on turn 3 was that I know I'm going to want it on turn 4, and I know there's not actually discard in the format at this mana cost, but I was thinking, like, kind of just a normal heuristic, like play it so if they have discard, then I can discard like a mountain or whatever, was like the idea. But of course I actually should have played a mountain because I have Hexgold Slash, so if I loot into it, I can't slash this now because I have this forest up. So this was actually an oversight on my part. And of course, then I draw it after I thought that and max punished, but I'd rather draw it now so I can get rid of the Kaido anyways. So slash here, swing, and again I have this 3-drop fortunately, so I'm in this spot. Here, just slam the what's this thing called again? Spinoderm. And just kind of chilling. And opponent passes. Here, so this is something that's kind of like so small mind games that I'll play sometimes when I'm doing drafts. Like normally, of course, you wouldn't want to pre-combat your spells, but I actually wanted to pre-combat this so I could incentivize them to block. I'm fairly far ahead on the board, and eventually the Spinoderm is going to go away for free. Right now, maybe it could do a lot of damage before that happens, but like they're on 22 and they have a way to gain life on board, so I wasn't convinced that the damage on this would be good enough, and I actually want them to block here because I'm not worried about running out of gas with the multiple rummagers, and I have a much stronger board than them if they make this trade. So even though they get their card back and I lose my Spinoderm, I actually want this to happen, so I pre-combated the troll. Again, kind of silly, maybe it doesn't affect anything, but that's the idea. Here, rummaging away. And again, they passed the turn, they didn't do actual anything, and then they played this this Skull Bomb and pass back. So here, I'm just trying to push in damage. I don't want to wait around because, I mean, that's how you lose to bombs and stuff, is you just sit around and don't press the issue, and then you lose. So I have a good attack here, so I'm sending everything. Sure, they get their value trade here, but I'm getting in a lot of damage. Unfortunately, they have the removal spell for the 3-2, but that's still kind of okay. I get in a decent hit for 9. And there we go. They proliferate, gaining 2. Here, so I'm doing some rummaging main phase in case I find something like a removal spell or something to make my attacks better. And I find another Spinoderm. Here I'm going to send, and this is an example of me playing very poorly. I played this, and again, just on habit, I sacked the 1-1 because I kind of always sack the 1-1 in their most circumstances, but this Spinoderm is dying next turn anyways for free. I 100% should have sacked it and messed it up by sacking the 1-1 instead. Here also, I would point out that the reason why I wanted to blow up the Skull Bomb now is because they are tapped out and they can't use the card from it. I wasn't too worried about them getting the value from paying 3 because they are getting kind of close to dying, but I didn't want to let them cycle it for free. I mean, or 1 mana, but you know, to get the card out of it. I think that in a longer game, I'm kind of winning here, given that I get to follow up with the Spinoderm anyways. And so I thought I would just develop 2 2-drops here. I would have the pump on the Steward next turn if I wanted it. And then, yeah, this way, again, I get like a card's worth of value. But again, I should have sacked the Spinoderm here. Okay, here, because I drew another 2-drop, I'm happy to just push for 5 and send. Again, I'll let them proliferate because it opens up attacks with all my other smaller creatures to kill the 4/4. Here, Blister Zoa, so again, my attacks are kind of stalled out. I don't mind playing the land here rather than looting it because I already have a play, and then I can get like that 1 card deeper, and I'd rather use my loots on things like real lands than the sack land that I can filter at like later on. Here they pass, give it +2/+2 send, they get the chump. It's getting close to being able to just send all here. They made me sack, so I sack I think a 1/3. Here, so they're sitting on a bunch of removal, and this hexproof is looking pretty convenient at the moment. Here, I was deciding if I wanted to send all or just the 5/5. Send all is somewhat iffy because, first of all, if they have a bounce spell, then it's significantly worse for me to throw away a creature here, given that I have this battle chair in hand, and the more bodies that I have, the better it's going to be, as kind of this inevitable threat. And then also, if I send everything, even if they don't have the removal, it's not actually lethal. Yeah, they go to 1 and I have this trampler. Maybe that's good enough, but I decided to opt for the conservative route here, given that it's a chump if they do want to have it and they have if they don't want to take 5 and they have nothing. Here, play the battle chair and pass. So my opponent with the blue suns for x = 5 steals the Blastoderm, and then here I can send with everything because they have to chump the 6/6. Here they did have the Whisper, which I did think about at the time, but I don't mind because, again, they're just trading off for the 2/2, not for the equips, so they still have to deal with this. Here's the Black Suns for x = 6, getting back a 4/4. So this is looking like it's starting to get out of hand, but they are still at 3, so it's not over. I re-equip just to use my mana most efficiently. They did put the Black Suns back on top. So I play out my creatures, and I actually pass this time because I am just waiting out the Spinoderm because it's gonna die, and they can't really send it because they're gonna die. So rather than let them like make a block and like either proliferate it to get the counter back on, or for me to trade off with the Spinoderm, I'd rather just let it die. I forget what's in their yard at this moment. They can get back any of these guys. Probably the Blister Zoa is their best bet. If they, yeah, x = 6 this, but I think I can still beat that, which is again why I'm willing to be a little bit hesitant here. So they lose the Spinoderm. Kind of a long game, I know, but we'll get to the sideboarding part. And I think we're finally there. So here I have 4 lethal creatures, and the Black Suns brings the thing back tapped. So they would need 2 things here, which I'm willing to bet they don't have. I'll send everything. If they cast as Black Suns here, they get 2 good blocks and then die to one of the 3 remaining lethal creatures. And that was game 1. So again, given everything we saw, this was the deck as it stands. And then the question being, if I do want to put anything, what that is, or maybe I don't want to put anything. And yeah, so that's sort of the decision to make. Again, you're welcome to pause if you want to put some thought into it yourself, but I'm going to jump into the deck too and talk about the decisions. So jumping over here, I think mostly it stayed the same. The main thing that I changed is I put in 1 more Molten Rebuke, and I cut the Oil Gorge Ritual. So this one is kind of interesting. On one hand, Oil Gorge Ritual, I think in a lot of matchups is actually good on the draw because of the life gain. Like if you're against red-white equips, even if you don't have oil stuff, you can throw it in there and it's very relevant. But the Rebuke is for 2 reasons. First of all, it seemed more important to me to be able to clear a blocker in this matchup than it did to play a 5-drop to the board. even though I'm on the draw and I'm maybe not the one that's pressuring, but I think my role in the matchup is still to be the aggressive player, given that they have both blue and black suns and a way to recur it. And don't forget that early in that game we also saw the Kaido, and recall that Rebuke hits the Planeswalkers. So yeah, again, not too much in the way of changes. I considered putting in this, but I was a little more hesitant to put in one more 6-drop again. I'm not looking to have the game go super long if I can help it, so I'd rather just interact with the board, maybe play to the board and finish with Hazardous Blast or something like that. So here, looking at game 2. Just 2-drop. I think they had a removal spell. And so here I had seen Vraska's fall already from them, so I didn't want to just play the Spinoderm out. So it was the 3/3 send, and they ended up trading it down. That's okay. Make a 4/4, play the Spinoderm. Here, send. Fortunately, I have the slash for the 2/3, so I get the 2-for-1 here. And so they steal the 1/1 and Vraska's fall, the Spinoderm. I thought about playing around a second one briefly, but I figured they have 2 cards in hand. I've only seen one. It's not the kind of card you just run every copy of, so I figured I'd risk it and play out the 5/5. And the Reservoir will keep it hexproof. Here, I have tricks, even if they have the -1/-1. Again, the Free from Flesh plays around that, so I'm totally fine here. I'll send. They don't block. And here, I actually was just fine making a 1/1. I could have played out the Ravager, but I actually was trying to think, and assuming they don't have another way to sack, given that I have the Volt Charge and the Free from Flesh, I think I can just churn out 1/1s kind of indefinitely. And they're not going to have a great answer for this, given that I have 2 pieces of interaction. So here, again, I can just send here. And I was tanking as to which piece of removal to use, or interaction. I was going to Free from Flesh it, I think was the line. But they just scooped while I sat there tanking. So again, not too much in the way of sideboard like changes on this one. There is some more up in games 2 and 3, or matches 2 and 3. But anyways, so let's look at those. Fortunately, a little bit shorter than the first game one I know is a long one. Here I just have a curve 2/3/4, looks pretty nice. Here I play the tap land instead of developing, because I want to guarantee that I can Spinoderm on 4. Here, bouncing, and again, this card very good in red-white, by the way, for anyone who's not in the know, because you can just re-buy all your equipments, and it's like free value. It's pretty nice. All right, so when I was saying that this game I played atrociously bad and wasn't punished, this is the big one, like the really big one, where like you forget what cards do and then you like do dumb things. So I send the 5/5 thinking, oh, I have Volt Charge, and I'm sure all of you guys know exactly where this is going. So they double block, and I Volt Charge the 2/3. Of course, this card has text on it. For some reason, I was thinking that, oh, they're tapped out, I can do this now. But yeah, you can play Phyrexian mana for this, and it gives protection. But fortunately, they were so astounded that I would do something so dumb that they clicked through and let this happen, and I was not punished for being horrendously bad. And then here, by the way, post-combat, I'm looting away one of my extra copies of this 3/2, just so I can hit my land drop and be more likely to be able to play Battle Chair on curve. Here, so they're playing Furnace Strider and just sending with everything. Probably correct on their part. It's hard to say, but on the other hand, like this would require double block, and I'm gonna have my mana up, so I think I'm on board with their line here too. So here I do have the Chimney Rabble, so I'm getting a big hit in. Now they're staying back. Here again, this time I'm willing to make this trade, because again, the way this card works, you can't be picky about the trades you make because there's a timer on it. So if I get in 5 damage, awesome, it's doing its thing. But this card is not there to just sit on defense typically, unless you have a matchup where you're almost guaranteed you're going to win the late game, or if you're just a really dire circumstance where you have to do it. But here I'm not, so I'm sending. Here, I think I probably should have pre-combated this too. Again, this is not my best work, because it definitely can matter that there's an extra token on here, or extra counter on here. But anywho, so I play this out. They volt charge. They also should have done this probably in response to this, but there it is. And so here, I'm just battle chairing and passing. Fortunately, they could have given this pro red and get in like a hit for 4. I don't know if they want to do that or not, but fortunately they didn't. Although this is strange, like, so I send for 6 and they don't block. I'm kind of worried about Has Blast, but I guess there's not really too much I can do about that at the moment. And then they just scoop it up. So again, here is what we were looking at from our current like configuration, and given what we saw from them, we can take a look to see if there's anything that we would like to put in here. Okay, so I believe it was this one, deck 3. And so here are the changes that I made on the draw against the red-white deck with the 2 drops and stuff. So second Rebuke comes in because, again, I like having my removal on the draw. And even like the little bit expensive removal, I don't mind having it, as long I'm not going to like side out a 2-drop for it, of course. But things that impact immediately against multiple Furnace Striders, I like this, because like if a Spinoderm comes down on 4 and they play a Furnace Strider and I can kill it, that's awesome for me. Out is the Centurions. Again, they had a lot of 2/2s off the equips. I think they had like the First Strike Trample one, which this can't even trade with. So this is not looking good on the draw. And I don't need a good excuse to side mediocre to bad cards out of my deck either. And these things, conversely, they block all those 2/2s, and they trade with Furnace Strider, and they're kind of brick walls against like over half my opponent's deck. So this is an example of where like I think it's easy to not think about picking a card like this during the draft because they are not, objectively speaking, good cards. But when you run into a matchup like this, if they either have to use their Volt Charge on this thing, or if they have to like use a combat trick to get through it, which by the way doesn't work so well because that's Death Touch, so again lines up very well, then these can be very valuable pieces out of the board. I also took out the Churning Reservoir. Partially, it's not as good because one of my oil synergies has been removed here. And then also, this kind of effect I'm not as excited about on the draw, because making a 1/1 every turn is not good enough on the draw. So it's not really where I want to be spending my mana anyways, and it doesn't impact the board itself. So yeah, like I'm not happy about this. Maybe you could make an argument that this shouldn't be in the main deck anyways, but again, I think I have enough stuff to justify it, and I have ways to turn a lot of ways to turn it on for free, and I have this Flame Stoker. So again, I was so happy to keep it main deck, but I don't want it here. And I think I also took out the Has Blast. This is another thing. If your deck can go over what your opponent is doing, you don't need the Has Blast, and on the draw, can be a liability, right? Because you'd rather have something that affects the board immediately or can serve as like removal. And so on one hand, yes, I know that if they have like the 3/1 equip, then it kills it, or they have Skrelv, right? And so yeah, this can kill some stuff, I get it. But at the same time, things don't always line up that way. And also, if your opponent is a good player, this card is very doable to play around. Like people sometimes just leave their batter whatevers, the 3/1 equips. They just leave them on X2s when they could move them off, and all of a sudden the Hazardous Blast looks a lot worse. So yeah, I don't mind siding this out on the draw in this kind of matchup, because I think that given I have the Battle Chair, Ravager, a couple good 5-drops, and double Spinoderm, I think that I'm better at being big than they are anyways, so that means that I don't need the Blast to win. If I thought that their deck was going bigger than me, then I would be happy to keep this in on the draw because it would serve as a way to win still. But anyway, so here's the configuration. Let's go ahead and take a look at game 2. Again, 2-drop, 3-drop, 4-drop, 4-drop being Spinoderm. Pretty happy with this one. Again, I'm happy to take trades on the draw. Even if they had like a trick or something, I don't care. If they use their turn to use a trick to functionally be a removal spell on my 2/2 and not develop their board, even better for me. Happy to take the trades here. So play the 2/3. They send. This time is interesting. I didn't take the trade this time in particular for two reasons. Firstly, last time, their trick would have been +2/+2, which trades 1 for 1, which is fine. Here, the Blazing Crescendo would be like a value play, 2 for 1. And also, this guy hits for 3 on the crackback, and I'm only... and then the Spinoderm is a pretty safe block after that. So I thought that I could squeeze in 3 damage here because the Spinoderm has hexproof as well. So here, played out swing. Here, they play out the Furnace Strider, draw for the turn, play out my 1/3. Here I'm passing again. I know I mentioned last time that, okay, this is in there to try and like send, but I didn't think that like sending here was maybe in my best interest, because if they have a removal spell here, I'm taking a pretty massive hit, I think. So I'm happy to just chill here for one more turn. Here, they didn't have a removal spell, which I think they would use if they had one, and so I'm happy to attack here. I think maybe I should have sent with it the turn before. I'm honestly not sure about that. Like I said, not my best or cleanest play, but the point being, this guy's kind of an all-star, and that was sort of the one of the points of this video. Here, I play this. I'm gonna blow up the Skrelv because I don't want them to start giving this pro green and attacking past the Basilisk. And so here, notice that, okay, so they have the first strike trick, which, or not trick, but the first strike equip here, which allows them to attack. But otherwise, imagine this was like a 3/2, the thing I cited out, right? They could send with this, and if I trade, then they have attacks with everything else. So again, even though they have the first strike, this is still being quite good. And then here again, happy to just play my removal and sit on my 1/3. They draw a rare, have a bunch of equips. Fortunately, they kind of don't, I lucked out again. They don't quite know how this works, I think, because it needs to be on 2 different creatures to get the triggers. So I just take my 3. I can't block again, it has first strike. Here I drew the Slash, which is lucky. And they're in kind of an awkward situation, actually, because if they move this... Well, actually, yeah, okay, so if they move the first strike off, then I get to trade with it. And if they move the helm off, now I have the X-Gold Slash. Of course, they don't know that I have it, so their play makes total sense. And then I can slash it, and fortunately knock it kind of snowballed from here. Here I'm just chilling. No need to Volt Charge anything immediately. Happy to play this, gain some life back, and have just a big blocker. And then from here, I spike the Ravager and kind of turn the corner, and I think the game ends pretty quickly from here. So again, the point being, this card, again, just one decision to put in this thing. Maybe who knows if this like Molten Rebuke could have been a Churning Reservoir or something silly like that. But the point is that I think that those kinds of decisions can make a really big impact in this format, as evidenced by a game like this. Okay, and then looking here, again, just kept all green sources with the 2-drop. Here I'm on the draw, just making some trades, playing out creatures. Opponent has a Whip. This is one to keep track of, and the Ichor Plate Golem, both kind of big ones. Here, happy to take this trade again if they have like a Titanic Growth to kill my 2-drop. I'd much rather them use it here. And so here I could play this out because, you know, you could argue that the Spinoderm can block their whole board, and you can't be removed. But again, I'm not really trying to mess with the War Whip. Like, that card can win on its own, and I think I'm at 19 life still. I think I have the tools here that I don't need to risk this. Like if they have a +3/+1 and then my Spinoderm dies and they gain a card and then I have to deal with the Whip anyways, like that's a whole mess. So I'm happy to sack my Slinger just to blow up the whip, because that card can get scary on its own, and play out my 1/2. Here, again, I don't mind if they have a trick. I'd rather them just use it now and I get my loot, or rummage. Here, play this so that I have slash up, and I have pretty good blocks. I could feasibly hold this in order to try and get the blowout, but I suspect, again, if they're like a decent opponent, if they're going for multi-block, they probably aren't going to do so in a way where they get blown out only by this. Maybe that's not the case, but I'm willing to use my mana. I will say though that I think the plan was actually, again, hard looking back at the game, but I think it was also that if I put the counter on here, then I have 6 to sack the Flamestoker next turn. Yeah, and that's why I didn't loot the land, because I wanted to guarantee that I could do this. Turns out that I drew another Spinoderm, so I'm not sacking it quite yet, but that's fine. I'm willing to just play the land out now, because again, I anticipate sacking this anyways, and this way if I draw another land, then I have hit my land drop before I draw 4. Here, I'm okay just trading this off, actually. I have 4 cards coming my way, I think, and so I just want to not take damage and pull ahead on cards. And same thing here, this is sort of strange, right? Like I could be attacking with this, and I had good attacks, and I do have a block sack here, but they have this equip, and I want to prioritize just not taking damage, because if I pull ahead on cards, then I'm likely winning from here. Here I get the troll, I'm happy to send, no blocks, and so I put the Free From Flesh on it to give it more counters so that it sticks around, and a little extra damage, and I think from here I've kind of turned the corner. And just kind of bury them in card advantage and Volt Charge to the face. Alright, so again, given everything we saw from here, again, quick recap. Here's the graveyard, here's the board, and here's Exiled, I guess. So what are we thinking with regard to our sideboard plan here? And what stuff do we want in, what stuff do we want out? Alright, so going over here, deck 4. This one, I did something similar. Again, just an example. So these basilisks can come in. They're good blockers, and again, they're largely ground creatures. Also, it trades with the War Whip token. Again, not the whip itself, but just not taking damage is pretty important here, I think. Again, I thought they were a little too aggressive to keep this in on the draw. Maybe on the play you can say it's decent, because being able to churn out chump blockers isn't nothing in a matchup like this, but on the play I thought it wasn't good enough, or sorry, on the draw rather, I think it's a little too slow. And notice here, so I talked about this in the draft portion, I actually side out a Furnace Strider, because versus what they're doing, they like, I'm assuming they have like tricks, and playing a 5-drop after they've had their turn 5 and hoping that the block goes well for me is not something I'm really interested in. I'm unlikely to want to haste it out on turn 5. And like, actually, I guess the way to put it is that can basically never go well for me, because my best case scenario is they pass the turn, which again is not bad, but that would happen anyways if I had a Molten Rebuke. But instead, now I play it, and if they do have it and they send in, like, I can't really do anything, right? Like, sure, I guess I'm forced to make the block because I'm not taking a giant chunk of damage for no reason. And if they if they do have it, then I'm in bad shape. Note that this time I left the Hazardous Blast in. Here, when I compare like red-white versus my opponent this game, the previous opponent was, I felt, a bit smaller. Like, for example, if I don't draw my like one of out to the whip can end up causing serious damage in the long game, where I can find positions where I can't attack through, or I do have an attack, but then they trade with their whip creature, re-equip the whip, and I'm kind of stuck. Again, Molten Rebuke also another answer for the whip, of course, nice to have. And also I put in this Maze's Mantle because I think that being able to build a creature like a 3/5 looks very good versus them. So if they do something like tap out for a Furnace Strider and I can Maze's Mantle in combat because they're tapped out, or if I can use this as some kind of a trick, even being a little bit more expensive, that the body it leaves behind is going to matter a lot. So yeah, I don't mind putting this in. Also, if I have these Death Touch guys, then it gives me some way to protect them, which is not that important, because again, I'm not devastated if they're using their removal spell on this thing, but it's not nothing either, so something small to consider. I thought about the Canopy too, because again, Whip's a really scary card. I've certainly lost kind of single-handedly to it before, but they didn't have flyers, they didn't have a lot of artifacts that I'm happy to kill, like a Volshock Splitter. They still keep the 2/2 around, so I'm not happy to blow up the equip half of it. And so as scary as Whip is, I think that I have other ways to potentially mitigate it or to win the game that I don't need to put this in. And so I left it in the board, even though, again, a lot of respect for Whip as a card. So looking here how this one turns out. Handful of 2-drops and one of our Rebukes, which I'm happy to see. Opponent looks to be on missing a land drop because their turn 2 play was to Crescendo to try and hit a land, I'm guessing. They hit the Whip, which is awesome for me because they don't have the white source. But then they have this thing, whatever it's called, Miglos, which, as we all know, is scary. So here I'm just on 2-drop. Take my 4. I'm rummaging. And so here I already have this idea in mind. I'm discarding the 2-drop because I need to get to Rebuke in time. Because if they tap out, I would want to be able to kill it while they can't pump it. And so I really need to be able to hit my land drop. Here, I'm playing out the 5/5. I could play out the Basilisk, but the Basilisk doesn't block properly with the 3/3. So I'm actually okay with taking one more hit with the Miglos here. And again, if they happen to tap out, then hopefully between my 2 rummages, I can find land 5. So they play Ichor Plate. No attack, because since they had to tap out pre-combat here, they don't get to swing with the 4/4. Here I rummaged away the 2/2 again. I did hit my land. So here they're tapped out. I kill the Miglos. No attacks, because again, I don't want them to double block and just trade the Ravager for one of their creatures. Here, I'm happy enough to play the Chimney Rabble and just chill. Again, I'm not trying to take trades here because I have the Haz Blast in hand. So the bigger I can keep the board, the more impactful Hazardous Blast is going to be. Here they get counters on the Golem. Here I do blow up the Golem. Again, I'm just sacking 1 power worth of damage to kill one of their creatures, which is nice. So even though it very marginally makes the Haz Blast worse, again, I think it's worth it, and it shrinks their Steward, which is nice. Play out my 1/3. Again, here, they actually, I'm guessing, don't have good ways to get through it because they're using their Volt Charge here. And to turn on my sideboarded 1/3. They pump and Infectious Bite and send. Here, fortunately, they're tapped out. I have this triple block where they actually just trade straight up with the Rabble. Here, looting away the forest and the forest. Okay, get in my 1 damage since I'm playing the Spinoderm, and I don't think they have good blocks. Or good attacks, rather. Here, I'm sending with these both because I actually don't mind 2-for-1ing. I think that the Spinoderm is going to be good enough to pressure here, and I also think that I have some decent draws left in my deck. I'm not sure this is correct, but it's kind of an awkward situation because if I only send with the Spinoderm, then they have good attacks if they swing back and they have any kind of interaction or whatever. And so by doing it this way and killing one of their creatures, then I make sure that they don't have good attacks on the way back, so I can get ahead on damage instead of just trading it. And so that's a little spewy, maybe, hard to say, but it's the line I ended up taking. Here I send, again, willing to take the 2-for-1 if they give it to me. Send again. Okay, here I'm kind of just holding on to this slash in case they have like a fight spell or something. Here they pump and send. here you can, I think it shows my indecision. I started to target with it, and I think thought better of it. Here, I'll send with everything, kill this, they get to proliferate or whatever, and put them to 1, so I have 3 lethal attackers. So here I play out my 1/3. I could send with the 1/3, but I'm not super excited about any of the trades. Like even if they double block the 2/2 and the 1/3, I guess killing their Rummager is kind of nice, but I don't actually remember if there was an active reason for me holding it, but I think I have 4 cards, so I can just chill-ish. Here's the Rebuke. Did I have one already earlier? Yeah, so this is the second one. So one of those is the Sideboard Rebuke. Who knows if it would be better as a Furnace Strider, but here I think certainly I'd prefer it to be a Rebuke. Here, they're just doing all their oil stuff, and they play this out. And the Mantle is looking pretty good here, especially with the trample damage. But I think I looted into the Volt Charge anyways. So again, I think, as you can see, the Mantle I think might have been good here. So the assessment of that it might be relevant given the creature sizes and the way the matchup played out, I think is correct. We saw that the Rebukes being impactful plays against their plan seemed to be relevant as well. And then the 1/3s we saw in both the second and third matches, just relevant bodies against the ground strategies. So again, I think that, of course, the deck was pretty good just at face value, right? Double Spinoderm is kind of sick. And then I had some good ones as well, Ravager, Battle Chair, and so forth. So I'm not saying that like the sideboarding carried this, but I do think that it was a difference maker, and it certainly can be in this format. And just as a quick bonus, if anyone is still actually watching this, there was an interesting one too I had. Let me see. Kind of having a down format for me a little bit. I'm at like around 77, but like not so bad. I had a really rough streak in the beginning of 3-1-2s and have been kind of digging my way out of it recently. But I know I had an interesting one that I wanted to show you guys. I think it might have been this one, where, okay, yeah. Just an example of some ways you can get a little bit creative with sideboarding. So it was like green-red, just generically decent. Oh, actually, I think this deck... No, this deck sucked, but it had the Forge in it. I think that was the main thing. But anyways, so things I saw from them. I saw a Viral Spawning and some 5-drops. And a Pacifism, and I think there was a second Pacifism in here somewhere. I can't remember. Yeah, okay, and then there's a second Pacifism. And so I started, when I was doing my sideboarding, I was looking at it. This was the deck for anyone interested in, if you wanted to pause it and take a look. And what I did was this. So I put it in one island because my fixing was actually pretty good between double Vorak. I had also a Scrap Gorger. And so I did this and put in the Surgical Skullbomb because it's pretty good against anything token related, like the toxic, I forgot what it's called, 3-mana green spell that makes a 3/3. It's like a straight up 2-for-1 if they haven't turned the toxic on yet. And that... it's not bad versus 5-drops, and you can use it to rebuy your creatures that they pacify for value. So like, just an example of ways that you might think that this card is completely irrelevant in your draft because you're a green-red deck, but sometimes when you end up with like things like, hey, I have good fixing, you can find creative ways to squeeze value out of your drafts. And I think just it was relevant in this game. Like they had pacified this. And then at some point, so I had the Skull Bomb, I bounced my own guy to draw a card and get the creature back. And then like some number of turns later, it's just this 3/3, and they ended up having to use another Pacifism on it in what turned out to be a really tight game, right? Ended up being very, very close, and ended up just barely squeaking out a win over like 20 turns. So again, just an example of how some of these small decisions I think can matter a lot in some of your matches, and something that if you haven't been taking careful note of, like paying attention to, that you can maybe squeeze some edge out of in your future drafts. So yeah, I think that's about it. If anyone's still listening to this, hope it was useful or instructional for you. Yeah, good luck on everything, and yeah, go win drafts.